Today, we are going to talk about how to avoid the 4 most common saxophone injuries. So playing the saxophone is a very physical activity. We are actually holding the instrument, it's hanging around our neck, we're blowing air into it, our mouth's around the mouthpiece, our fingers are on it. We are very, very actively playing the saxophone. And because of that, and because of all of the repetition in playing the saxophone, you can definitely cause some injuries. So today I'm going to talk about the 4 most common and give you some advice on how to avoid them. The first and most common is a lip injury. Now the good thing about lip injuries is they don't last very long at all, maybe a day or 2. But the unfortunate thing about them is they happen to everyone. If you have played the saxophone, you have definitely played your sax until the point where your lip starts to hurt. The reason that happens is because your lip is a muscle, and just like any other muscle, if you work it more than you usually do, it's gonna get sore and eventually stop working. So the same thing happens with your saxophone. So if you generally practice about 30 minutes, and then you have a really long session where you're going like an hour or an hour and a half, and your lip really starts to hurt and you start to blow out, that is because you are overworking the muscle. So that is super common. It happens to everyone. And the cure is to stop playing for a little bit. Sometimes if you stop for an hour or 2, you can come back and everything is good. Sometimes it might take a day or 2. But it is very common for your lip to hurt if you have been playing for a while. Now, if you are a pro saxophone player, you already know this. You probably already had a blowout. So a blowout is when your lip muscle gets too sore to actually hold the embouchure. So that happens like if you're playing a really long gig or a couple gigs in a row and you've really overworked your lip muscle and it just can't hold on anymore, your lip will blow out. Again, it's not a big deal. Within a day or 2, you'll be ready to play again with no problem at all. Now there are a couple things that you practice that will wear your lip out faster. The first is playing a ballad. If you are practicing a ballad and you're playing the ballad several times in your practice session, all of those long notes are really going to wear out your lip. So if you are working on a ballad, do it in smaller chunks. Don't spend an entire practice session working on a ballad, or your lip is definitely going to get sore and possibly blow out. The second thing is practicing altissimo. If you are working on altissimo, only practice it for about 5 minutes at a time. If you go much beyond that, especially like up into 10 minutes, you are going to kill your lip and your practice session for the day will be over. Let me know in a comment below if you have had any of these saxophone injuries, pains, strains, or sorenesses while playing the saxophone. Also, let me know what you did to fix the problem. There are going to be a lot of saxophone players reading these comments, and you might be able to help someone else get through the same struggle that you are going through. A sore lip can also be a warning sign of a couple different things. The first is that you have a hard reed. If you have a harder reed, if the density of the reed is making it so that your embouchure has to work a little extra hard, then your lip is going to give out faster. So if you notice that you just got a new box of reeds and all of a sudden your lip is hurting sooner or more, chances are that you are using harder reeds. The same thing goes for if you have leaks in your saxophone. That is usually how I know when it's time for my saxophone to go to the repair shop. If I'm practicing and in the middle of my practice session, suddenly my embouchure starts to hurt, my lip feels like it's wearing out, I don't have the support that I usually do, then if that happens a couple days in a row, I know that I have some leaks in my saxophone and it's time for it to go to the repair shop. The extra leaks create more resistance. The more resistance you have, the harder your lip muscle has to work to keep the embouchure shape. The second injury is pretty drastic and it does happen to a lot of saxophone players, and it is your wrists. You can develop carpal tunnel from playing the saxophone if your wrists are not in the correct position. So obviously playing the saxophone, you are doing a lot of repetitive movement with your hands. And if your hands are not in the correct position, your hands are going to start to hurt. So when it comes to playing the saxophone, you want straight wrists. So I'm going to stand up so you can see what I'm talking about. You want your wrists to go into the saxophone at a straight angle. You do not want any kind of curves. If you have this and you try to move your fingers fast and a lot, you are going to be in pain. So you want your wrist to be straight, going right into the saxophone with no bend in them. When I was in college, I had this problem. My hands were sticking out just a little bit, creating a lot of tension in my wrists, and I did develop some hand problems. As soon as I put my hands in the correct position, the problem went away, and I've never had any hand problems or wrist problems ever since. And I play the saxophone a lot. So if you have your hands in the correct position, you shouldn't have any problems at all. But if you have a bend in your wrist, you are asking for wrist pain. If you're watching this video about saxophone injuries, then chances are you are a saxophone player. If that's the case, then I would like to invite you to come check out the Scott Paddock Sax School. In my Sax School, I have courses that are dedicated to just about every part of playing the saxophone. So if you are a beginner, a refresher, an intermediate saxophone player, or you just want to learn how to improvise, learn some music theory, get your tone together, learn a bunch of songs, whatever it is, stop by the Scott Paddock Sax School and I will get you headed in the right direction with some step-by-step lessons. I'll put a link in the video description below. The third injury that we need to talk about is your right thumb. As saxophone players, we put our thumb under the thumb rest. So if you are pushing your saxophone out too much with your right thumb, you have your saxophone way out here, you are gonna have some thumb pain. So you do not wanna do that. Now, saxophone thumb rests are adjustable. Mine's tight, but you can usually slide them from side to side. So I would suggest playing with that a little bit and seeing where the best adjustment is for you, where the best position is for you. That could be really important in making your right hand feel super comfortable on the saxophone. But you do not want to push your saxophone out that much. So mine is slightly resting against my body when I'm playing. I'm pushing out just a little bit, but not too much. When thinking about your right thumb, you want to think about it more as a way to balance your saxophone than a way to hold your saxophone. So you don't want to be holding the weight of the saxophone with your thumb under the thumb rest. You just want to be balancing your saxophone so that it's not wiggling around. Now, there is going to be a little bit of weight and a little pressure on your thumb, but you really want to think about it as a way to balance your saxophone, not a way to hold your saxophone. Another thing to think about when it comes to your wrist, hand, and thumb position is your elbows. You don't want your elbows out far like that when you're playing the saxophone. You want them in. If you do this, it kind of looks like you're ready to fly away. You don't want that, and it doesn't put you in a good position or a comfortable position. So you want your elbows in closer to your body. And the fourth and super common saxophone injury is to your neck. We are wearing the saxophone. When you're a saxophone player, you are wearing the instrument. So if you are playing for a long period of time, that can definitely wear your neck down. So if you practice more than an hour a day, I would definitely suggest getting some type of harness. It's going to save your neck and make your life a whole lot easier, especially if you are playing the tenor sax. The heavier the sax, the more important some type of harness is. Now there are a zillion different types of harnesses out there. The one I use, I actually built myself out of a couple different straps and harnesses because I wanted one that was really mobile, that can move up and down. Most of them you're in a fixed position, but if you are playing the saxophone for more than an hour a day, especially if you're playing the tenor, then you definitely want some type of harness. If you are a bari saxophone player, then you want a harness all of the time. You don't want that bari sax hanging around your neck. If you do use a regular neck strap, make sure you use one that has some padding on it. You don't want just a leather strap that is digging into your neck. A little extra padding will go a long way in the comfort of holding the saxophone for long periods of time and from saving your neck from having any types of pain. In addition to having a quality neck strap or using a harness, you also want to have a really good posture when you're playing the saxophone. So you want to be as upright as possible. You don't want your back hunched over or slunched over, and you don't want to lean to the side. I often see that a lot, especially with newer saxophone players. They either have their mouthpiece on a little crooked where their head is turned to the side, or they're actually leaning to the side, especially tenor players. When the saxophone is on the side, you have a tendency to lean. You want to try and be as upright as possible. Now, of course, you might not be perfectly perpendicular, but you do want to be as straight as possible and try and maintain good posture when you're playing the saxophone, especially if you're playing for long periods of time. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you'd like to dive deeper into my saxophone world, come check me out at the Scott Paddock Sax School.